Not yet. Now.
No. Tell me again.
This is Trent Loucks, and you're watching the Break It Down show. Go ahead.
This is Trent Loucks, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
There it is. All right. A little bit of technical and lag stuff going on here as we get started and settle in. Also, I have in studio with me the Panda, John Allen, fellow Army veteran. All three of us are Army guys. We all belong to the Human Terrain System program at one point. Trent ran the program, and it's really neat to be able to talk to someone at the very top when you got guys like John and myself at the very bottom working on the ground, trying to provide the information that Trent needs to get everybody what they need at the big customer level. So thanks, fellas, for coming on and having this chat. Also, by the way, John's drinking a little bit, so and it's Friday, so we're gonna cut it up a little bit and not be too serious, but we are gonna have a pretty fun and serious conversation. Trent, hey, great to see you, and great to see you, John. It's been 10 years, basically, fellas, since we've done this. Isn't that crazy?
Oh yeah, man. So, yeah, I think you and I.
It was just yesterday.
Last couple of days, like debriefing up in East Virginia, and that was it. So.
Yeah. Trent, what have you're still in the area because this whole program was centered out of Leavenworth. What are you doing today?
Today, I'm still in the Army Reserves and working as a CGSC instructor. Command General Staff College there at Fort Leavenworth, and then that's my part-time job. My full-time job, work at the Mission Command Battle Lab, AI capabilities for the Mission Command information systems.
That's fancy. I mean, AI wasn't even a thing we talked about in the Army 10 years ago, and already you have people working that task. It's incredible. Let's back up in time, though. Let's go back to the HTS days. You guys went through the full training together. When you went through that training, without your boss man hat on, but just Colonel Trent going through this thing, how was the training going through the schoolhouse for you to prepare you for the job that everybody was going to do on the battlefield?
Well, honestly, I think that the training was not up to the standard that it needed to be. Remember that it was a prototype program where they were really trying to figure it out, and it was they were trying to use lessons learned from Vietnam area when they did chords, and I believe they really transitioned the training more towards the non-military folks and trying to get them up to speed with integrating like our social scientists. There was less social science training for us Army folks who are the knuckle draggers, and there was more military training. And when you look at the population and demographics of the students going through, a majority of them were military, so it was a lot of basic training all over again.
John, what about you? What was your experience? You've been through a lot of training throughout the years when you were in the Army. How was it for you? Was it preparing you for the battlefield?
It kind of felt like Trent was saying, it felt like a repeat for me, because I think 90 days before I took off to Kansas City to attend over there, I was actually in Afghanistan as part of the PRT. So I was a civil military operations chief out of one of the PRTs. And so when I got back, I mean, I'd recognized a lot of the stuff that they were trying to teach us just simply because I'd ended up doing it for the last, couple of years before that. So yeah, it really felt like it was trained towards the civilian personnel. So I'm sure some of it was great for them. I can't remember the guy that was in my gun truck, but he was when we did that final training exercise down in Polk on the convoy.
Yeah.
So watching him work a 240 and almost spray the truck behind us was fun, but I'm not, being that we were never going to run a convoy by ourselves.
Yeah.
That just seemed like extra extra fun time for the Army people.
And just for the audience to understand, so there's the training you often go through if you've never been in the military is you go somewhere and you do something, whatever that something is. Because our job is a very unique job, they sort of threw a lot of things out. Like the training these guys went through was different than the training that I had experienced just 18 months maybe prior to that. It was a totally different experience. And so the Army was trying to figure out what to do. But what happens, at least in terms of my career and all the times I deployed, I essentially, the training effect was like, I figure like 5 or 10% overall. Like, did I need to know this prior to deploying? And it was one of those things where they gave us very interesting classes. They taught us a thing called coin, and every teacher would say something different about how coin worked. And you're like, okay, well, since you guys don't know, apparently it doesn't matter what I do. I'm just going to coin the way I coin. And so all these problems gave us this knowledge base to try to go do a job, but they never said, here's the job, here's what you're going to do day to day. Like they really struggled to give us those tools and the ability to integrate within the Army. Then after that, we went to a practical exercise, which wasn't available the first time I went through. So I deployed, I stayed for, several rotations, and then I came back and they're like, now you have to go through this tactical training so you can certify to deploy. And that's where I met up with these guys. And we did, again, like an actual basic training type thing. It wasn't, up in the morning at 5 and getting yelled at and that kind of thing. But we got up early, we worked all day and that sort of thing. It was very expensive training for a bunch of military civilians to have to go through. What were your guys's, I guess, Trent, you go first. What were your thoughts on the Polk experience and what was given to us in terms of the value on the ground once we got to Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever we ended up going?
Well, Pete, interestingly enough, what we went through was the combat advisor course. It originated at Fort Riley, Kansas, with 1st Infantry Division, and I was actually part of that planning process, put that whole training together. I thought that training needed to do a ground range, in Afghanistan or Iraq or anywhere else for that matter. And so good fresher training for me. You can learn something new every time, and repetition builds muscle memory. So I thought that was a better choice than the CRC that they did at Fort Benning for our folks prior to the Fort Polk experience.
Yeah, there's some truth to that for sure. And then you broke up a little bit, so I'll kind of fill the holes in. He was saying that he was part of the training process in designing the training and making the choices and trying to find the right place to put people who hadn't been in the military. And for those of us that had been in the military, the ability to maintain our combat muscle and be able to, just validate that, we still knew how to point the gun in the right direction. John, what about you? What were your experiences? As a guy that had just got back from deployment, like me, you go through this training. I struggled to take it seriously. You might have been able to tell that, but what about you?
Same boat. So I kind of loved watching everybody come out to formation in the morning because you'd have the Air Force guys. We were there with the Air Force unit, and they would be lined up, dress right dress, as military looking as the Air Force can. And we'd be off in our own little gaggle off to the left. Be like, all right, here, we'll just kind of, I don't know, let's make it look like we're kind of in a formation over here. You got Rob getting yelled at for cutting off the sleeves to his Army PTs. That was fun.
Yes.
Him howling at the moon, trying to say, hey, that's okay. And I'm just there, okay, let's do this so I can either go back to the rack or go find something else to do.
Yeah.
The training there was fun. I mean, when we were actually doing training stuff, I remember the land nav was kind of a blast. So, especially when you're just dragging a couple social scientists behind you, it was more fun just giving them the map and be like, all right, I hope you remember this because I don't. The most fun I had is when we did the combat lifesaver.
Oh, man.
I had Anders Corps. You guys remember him? Harvard
Yes.
guy? So this guy,
Oh,
his own blood, and honestly, by this time, he kind of pissed me off. So I remember I'm getting ready to do the IV on him, so I stick the IV in him, and I didn't have the catheter plug. You know how you find the vein,
Yeah.
stick that in, pull out it, and put in the IV piece. I forgot the technical terms. So I pulled it out, and then I just turned around and like, oh man, where's the plug? So, listening to Andrew shriek a little bit, that was fun. Put that in. Kevin Cochran got me back later on. I forgot what we were doing, but he made sure to drop me. So good time.
I don't recall his name, but there was that older gentleman who was a hospital administrator, and he gave me my IV, and he had no fear of doing this. He went up with a shaky hand and then jabbed the needle through and through my vein. And I'm like, well, all right. Yeah. Do you want to try again?
That guy made it.
It was Bob
in Afghanistan.
Bob. Yes. He made it one day, right? Yeah. Yeah.
One day. Showed up at the unit.
I'm done.
Yeah. I still remember Bob's phone call.
Tell us about that. So this, I'll make you some background. Bob was an older guy. He wanted to deploy, had a lot of relevant skill for what we were trying to do in terms of hospitals and all that kind of stuff. But you can kind of see that his heart wasn't really in it. Like, it was fun, but like, is he really going to do this? And so then I think we kind of knew that he was not going to last long. There was a rumor about that. But Trent, you get the phone call. What does that sound like?
I deployed all the way to that hub, and we were all sitting together. It was me, Will Hardy, Kevin Cochran, Bob, Jeremy Bundrick. You know, there was a whole group of us sitting there, and Bob decided to go call his unit. He gives them a call, and he manages to reach a sat phone that they were actually in contact at the time on their fob. So they had rockets coming in, indirect fire, explosions going off. Bob can hear this over the phone, and that's when he was just like, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm out.
Oh, yeah, that would be too much. Okay, so let's go back to Polk. Trent, you did something that was bold and you know, I mean, from a command point of view, not really. But you had no authority. You said, "Hey, we're going to do our own end of training exercise," and you and I partnered on that. Talk about the process to get us going in a different direction and a more relevant direction, and why was that direction not correct?
So when you say not correct, you're talking about the original direction, or
Yeah, the original direction.
Oh, okay. So the original direction was designed completely around the combat advisor course. You know, the getting those guys ready to advise foreign militaries. It had nothing to do with social cultural research and analysis and doing operationally relevant research that would assist the units. And so made a pitch to the commander down there and just said, look, we can write our own scenario. We've got 3 smart guys. The 3 of us can collaborate on this, write our own scenario, and actually use what you already have, just insert a different piece and let us work our piece of it while still integrating in the fob life and patrols and whatnot. The old way, definitely irrelevant to our mission. And I think with what the 3 of us put together, me, you, and can't remember the gentleman's name now. Kevin was the other one.
Kevin Voights.
The 3 of us put together a really good scenario. Yep, Kevin Voights. Put together a really good scenario that allowed our HTS folks to get more out of that exercise than just walking the the line and finishing out their polk experience.
John, what about you? When you go through that training, what were your thoughts on what you experienced? How did it compare to all the other training that we'd had up to that point?
I mean, it's we as a group or me personally. So me personally,
Either one. What? Yeah.
Yeah. So me personally, it was still good. Like my first time, like interacting with foreign persons in a civil military operations type style. I was an infantry platoon leader, so you wouldn't think that that's the most likely place. But when I was in Baghdad, that was it's not that I was going to drag my company commander out to meet every person who purported to be a village leader. So I ended up doing that there, and then after I left active duty, I ended up in civil affairs, and that's basically all we do. So, yeah. I mean, there's a big part of the engineering and contracting piece, but that's actually, at least from my point of view, that was a small part of the overall mission. Like our whole point of civil affairs is to work yourself out of a job.
Right.
Make it so that the whatever the local government is can stand up on their own and do their thing without us. So anytime you get a chance to interact in a scenario where you're trying to either empower someone else to do what they're supposed to do for the local population, or you're supposed to identify a problem, see if there's a way that you can help the local area without making yourself the sole provider of that item, that's good stuff. So I'd say when we were at Polk for that last piece, I remember, I don't think I volunteered to lead any of the scenarios just because I felt like I had the experience already. So still, I mean, it was good to have some of the other guys go through it too and just watch. So I'd like to say it helps on my actual tour. So I ended up going to Delaram province in southwestern Afghanistan, so right along the Iranian border. But the Marines definitely had a different way of working. So, I mean, I'm not going to say it was any better or it was any worse. It was a lot more kinetic than the Army, which I get it. That whole area was dangerous. But, it was good stuff.
The training that I authored for us, and I think you'll get this, I made it so that it had no point. Like there was no puzzle to solve, because a lot of times the Army likes to do a training that's like, and then you win or whatever it is. But I purposely just made it like, this is what a day is like when you patrol. You come back and you report, and if you take your time and you dilly dally, all the reports will be in, and you will be the last one in with your information, and you'll be obsolete. There were two big things I wanted to impress upon all of us when we were doing this training was. One, there is no point. You don't know the answer. Keep going out, keep gathering information, and get it back to the command as fast as possible. Does that make sense? Does that resonate in terms of? Okay, good.
Collect information.
Hey, there's Trent. Trent's back.
Brief it. That's essentially the job on those kind of missions.
It's funny because I don't if you recall, but I don't remember the gentleman's name. He was also like over 50 somewhere, and he had figured out what was going on between the different villages. And he was telling me what happened. He's like, this village is doing this. They're poisoning the water. And I had to say to him, that's not true. I'm the one that wrote it. I didn't write that in, but he was determined that he had solved the puzzle. And I'm like, that's the exact opposite of what we want to have happen here. Like, you don't know anything. You have to go back out tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day and slowly piece together what this is. And you're not going to find, there's not a thread to pull, Do you think it was just so disappointing to have someone get it so wrong,
I mean, that's a good thing too, though. So the guy gets a taste of what analysis looks like. He goes out there, he figures this stuff out. I think I know the guy you're talking about. There's another retired 05 coming out. So, I mean, that's always been my contention with those kind of slots. So, no offense, but retired 05, not really doing the CA job and going out, not doing the 03, 04 type deal. Going out and doing the analysis, meeting those people. send it
One
out.
of the things that I learned from the whole exercise, because I'd written scenarios before in the Army, so that wasn't terribly hard. I'd written roles, but it was the interaction with the role players and how many of these guys didn't even speak English, and you had to explain, like the intent, like this is what I want you to do, this is how I want you to perform this role, and just how hard that side. And if you recall this, Trent, when we went and they briefed us, and I'm like, oh my God, these guys don't know anything, and then. What on earth is the Army doing with these guys if they're not taking all this care to get the message into these guys and what they want? Like, what are we even doing here, Trent? When we did that backdoor preparation of the language capacity, the actual Afghans, what were your experiences? And then in general, what did you think of the training that we created? Were you pretty happy with it?
I was happy for the beta test. That was our first run with it. I thought we did a great job. I know that you were a huge contributor to going and prepping those language guys to make sure that the interaction was authentic. You've already had your experience prior to the Polk experience, so you were able to give them more relevant and updated ways to do the interaction that was actually effective.
Was that a big leap for you to let me author this training?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, not at all. I've worked on teams. I've worked on scenario development teams. Like I said, we designed the original training at Fort Riley for that thing. So this was an easy transition to turn over the ranks to somebody that's far more experienced and competent at doing that. I didn't have anything to offer to the language instructors.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you guys recall this, but the moment that capsulized that whole training scenario at Fort Polk, Tigerland, was when we sat in a room. This is for the audience. I'm going to describe this a little bit. We sit in a room and you're observing a meeting that's going on so that because you can learn things by watching a meeting. This is a common thing. And so in this fishbowl that we're watching the fish, there is a service member who's not a student, and then a service member who's not a student, and they're talking about service member stuff back and forth. There were two uniformed military people talking to each other about supply. And I'm like, this is an hour of training where we watched people have a conversation that had nothing to do, like there wasn't an Afghan in the room. There was no elicitation techniques being displayed. It was literally a conversation about logistics. Do you guys recall this moment?
I think they rotated us through in groups, and I was stuck with an Air Force group that was taking copious notes. Remember that? I'm like,
oh, I absolutely remember it, and it was an hour of my life I'll never get back.
Yeah, there were moments like that.
Let me explain this. I want to explain this to the yes. There were many moments like that. So. We're in pre-combat training. This place is scary enough that a guy heard gunfire over the phone and quit. All right. So this is real work. This is no shit dangerous work. And so we're doing things like standing around. By the way, any second we stand around, it's costing the military, I don't know, let's say $50,000. Like anytime this group stands there and does something, it's expensive to have us idle. And we learned skills that we were never going to use. Like we learned how to do a call for fire and all these different things. And some of this stuff is all military relevant, but we have a really hard job to do that really nobody else can do. And we're watching someone practice. We did this whole picnic with the Afghans, I called it, because we all sat around and ate Afghan food, and it was supposed to be some kind of cultural immersion training. And you just sat there and ate. This job was way too hard to train at that level. Yeah, frustrating. I get so frustrated. Trent, I know I've beaten up on the training, and you guys are doing your best. Did the training evolve and get better over time once you took over the program?
It did be. Everything gets better with iterations, especially when you have them working to do the after action reviews, get the lessons learned, and then insert that. We also worked, this was after I moved from the team leader role into the director role, and that was for us to continue to update based on relevancy of what we're getting with the feedback downrange.
What was the feedback?
So with our evaluation cell, we did a lot of assessments with our supported units, asking them to provide their feedback of whether or not the teams are doing the right thing, if it's relevant. We had I believe a 6-question online survey that we sent to all of our supported units, and it was 96% positive every time it came back, and that was, the teams are doing good work. They're providing us with the information we need. It's timely and relevant.
What are your thoughts, John?
So from my trip, I mean, I'll be honest, the team leader I had is quite possibly one of the worst people I've ever run into. A guy named Gus Medina. Ugh. But I mean, we did some things that, like I said, the Marines were a lot more kinetically minded, and yeah, it was a terrain thing. So if you guys heard about the Kajaki Dam,
yeah,
so local area in the Southwest, so just north of it, really kinetic, just south of it, really kinetic, and everywhere around it, really kinetic. So we'd have a tendency of going out on these analysis missions where the Marines will literally have just cleared an area. So maybe like the day before. So we would go on this patrol with we'd have a Marine squad with us, and we'd talk to local police. And the questions and the answers the questions, yeah, they came from our social scientists, but the answers were basically what you'd expect in that kind of scenario. They're going to say whatever we want to hear, because they know we're not going to be there very long. Because that was the other thing they did. Marines would go through, kill everybody, and then take off. So, and it was a lot of, it was less the atmospherics type stuff, which atmospherics would be a little disrupted anyways, because you just went through and cleared the area. But a lot more almost intelligence gathering. So we were definitely subordinate to the 2 shops. So it wasn't a 9-shop type thing. They had a civil affairs team from the Army there. They were kind of doing the same thing we did. So,
let me put some clarity in what you're saying so folks can understand. So
yeah,
in the military, they chunk out responsibilities. There's an operations person. There's supply, like logistics. There's intel, which is the 2 shop. There's all these different. There's communications, like computer things. All these different offices, and civil affairs is one of them, and that's often called the 9 shop. And so they're trying to decide where you put this asset, this HTS asset. Where do you put John when he comes in? And John comes in and says, "I'm a civil affairs officer normally, but here my job here is to help you guys with your people." And so maybe you get put into civil affairs, or maybe you get put under this, or maybe the commander just says, "You're my team. You're going to roll out with me every single time I roll." It just kind of depends on the commander on how you get deployed. And one of the funny things that I learned along the way with HTS is that the commanders weren't really trained on how to use us. They had to sort of figure it out for themselves, because there wasn't really a doctrinal answer that they had a command on. Sure, they get a briefing, but then they just do what they want to do, because there wasn't really, it was like, here's this tool. Just like there were all these tools the commanders would get. It's very modular. Like, here's this team, here's an ag team, here's a business team, here's all these different teams. Go ahead and enable them and go out and kill the enemy. It was basically what would happen. And so you would end up in all these different spots. That's what John's talking about, is now we're under this intelligence shop, which is a fair place to put us.
Yeah.
What was the best answer for that unit, though? Where should you have been?
So it seemed like the relationship with their 9 shop was broken. So I don't know if the Army guys that were there before us, so they I mean, they were there on, I think it was a 12-month tour, either a 12-month or a 9-month tour, but essentially they've been relegated. So the brigade or the regimental headquarters were here, and the 9 shop is like on the other side of the post.
Bad.
Yeah,
Bad
that's
sign.
not a good sign. So the 2 shop, I kind of felt like, yeah, we could have influence there, but that's just another Gus thing. I guess he was trying to sell the capability as much as he could as intelligence gatherers. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
that was
Well,
fun.
and it's one of the things that we do. I want to let Trent talk. Trent, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say we had a really good experience with the 2 different units that we supported. Fortunately, the team that was there ahead of ours did a really good job with integration into the unit and proved worth. So we were part of the commander's special staff, and we basically flexed to his priorities and his mission. So we supported the 2, the 7, the 9. We did some stuff with the female engagement teams. We kind of flexed all over the place, and actually had one smaller team deployed forward with one of the battalions, and they were there almost full time, so detached from us at the brigade headquarters.
One of the things I would do was I would share my patrol reports with a wide reading list to include all of you guys. Did that in any way help at all to see what we were creating and to give you guys a picture?
So
Absolutely. Anytime you have information sharing where we're able to provide information to each other, you may be seeing trends, and you may be able to tie that together with what's going on in one region, what I'm seeing in my region. You may be for lack of a better term, a trend setter. You may see this trend going on in yours, and it's moving its way into ours. So kind of giving us a heads up of indicators and things to look for in order to properly advise our units, and not let our guys fall into the same mistakes that someone else is.
And what were you going to say, John?
No, it was always useful just seeing reports from the other teams too. Just, I mean, even seeing the format of what you guys were writing, what you were doing with your information. So see if we can do with our product.
One of the advantages I had, from multiple deployments was, I'd been taught by commanders how to best use me, and they're like, these are the words I want you to say to the next version of me. And it still took time. I was able to compress that time over many units, but still it took, multiple weeks to become relevant to that commander. And I knew what to say. And I would, I would say, you're going to put me under probably a cap. It's going to be the wrong spot. I need to work directly for you, but we'll get there. You'll see from my reports what I do, and then you'll want to give me access to the couch. And then ultimately I would put them on the spot. I'm like, and in about 3 months, you're going to look at me and say, you're my number 1 force multiplier. We couldn't be doing this without you. You're my guy. And you don't have to say that because we're saying it now, but I already know you're going to say it. And every single commander would look at me and I'd be like, look, we already had this conversation. And I'd be like, yeah, but still, I want to, So when it's done well, and you can directly impact how the commander sees their battlefield, and that was where the gold for me really was in trying to give, because here's what would happen. The ag team would go out, report success. I would go out and be like, I talked to the farmers. They weren't stoked, they're laughing. I talked to, the farmer over here that grew pomegranates, and he shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't care what this guy says. I'm going to do my own thing. And the commander is going to lose his mind. When the CA team, sorry, John, when the CA team comes in and briefs, hey, we're going to paint the government center, and that's going to make people believe in the government. I write that down. I go ask the questions, and they're like, that is not the government center. The government center is that dude's house over there. It's that hut. And he's the guy we go see when we have problems. And I write all that down and give that to the commander. Now they're like, okay, I have something to fix now, right?
Yeah.
But so that's only if you can say it again.
So who are we talking to and why?
Yeah. And the ability to get the commander to trust that information, though, is vital, because a lot of our teams would sit on the fob, write these super long reports. They didn't communicate in the way that the military communicated. They wanted to write these magnum opuses. I have figured out the Belushi people and how to understand them. Please stop.
Yeah.
Trent, how do you deal with these problems where we have mechanisms that work? I'm very successful at working with these commanders, and then you have teams that are completely OBE the moment they get there because they just don't know how to keep up. They don't know what's relevant to the command. How do you, as the boss man, try to fix this big, goofy
Well, one technique, and we talked about before, is to get an honest assessment from those units, and so it went with the surveys. I did a lot of phone calls with commanders on the ground, so I'm staying up, till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, so I can talk to commanders over in Afghanistan at their convenience, trying to figure out why teams are being ineffective and what it is. Sometimes it's personality. Sometimes it's the team's inability to integrate. So each problem seemed to be unique, and so each one of those problems had to be tackled separately. Some were successes. Some, we never solved.
Trent, is it a good program? Should we have this for units that deploy?
I've got my opinion on it, which is I think it was a good program, but it wasn't tenable in its current configuration. You can't have, I think Kevin Voigt's actually called it this, you can't have a full-time capability with part-time staff. And that's everything from, your 1 year social scientist or, human terrain analyst or research managers, fill in the blank, each position, they were here for a year and then they were gone. That's all they were ever promised. So some of our guys were fortunate to get second tours, but ultimately it needed to be a more long-lasting and enduring program, and you can't do that with part-time help. The other big issue that I saw was the individual replacement program. I mean, I was fortunate. We had one person from the previous team stay, and the rest of them redeployed. So when I deployed with 4 people that I had just gone through training with. So it was easy to integrate one person in and work well as a team who already had the experience on the ground. So, it's got to be a team thing. And I really believe that in order to be effective, that when that combat unit is in their pre-deployment training at home station, that's where the human terrain team needs to integrate and actually deploy with that unit. So they've already started the integration. They started the training. They figured out where they belong in that unit's battle rhythm, decision-making cycle, etc. And so there are a lot of solutions. I think it's an effective program. Could it have been more effective? Absolutely.
John, what would be your response to that question?
Well, I remember hearing it getting shut down, and I'm not sure to what level it was actually shut down. Like, if it sounds like HTS has its own separate component is Dunzo, but what did the Army actually end up doing with the capability? So did it end up rolling into civil affairs? Did it end up rolling into the information operations guys? Because I know the Navy put a big focus on information operations, but they made the definition way too broad.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. People coming in promising the world, and all of a sudden captains in the ground, they're not getting the world. So good way to lose credibility there. But I always wondered what the Army ended up doing with what we had, because it seemed like it is useful. It would have been nice to have a little more country specialization in there. I guess one of the big things I learned from my HTS tour is depending on the background of your sociologist, that is going to be the problem in that region. So, like the sociologist I had more of an environmentalist background. So when we're out there, everything had to do with water quality. Everything had to do with food quality. I'm like, that, okay, but maybe there's a bigger world than just that.
Yeah.
So having that country specialization already, I mean, maybe 6 months of school, go somewhere, take an Afghan course and see what's going on over there, probably would have been useful. But so a little more specialization on the social scientist part. The research manager role, it's useful if they know the systems, if they know how to put together a civil military information picture, so information map. So for the commander, that's always useful. But and even the human trained analysts, that's, if you don't have people that are good enough at doing that already, you figure most of your Army guys that are going out there on their first tour, it's their first time doing it live. So if you have a bunch of civilians that have done it before, that's awesome. I mean, regardless of whether they're doing it in the same region or not, at least they've already talked to Afghans like that. So did the Army end up doing anything with capability?
Yeah. Trent, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to answer John's question. That's I was part of the shuttering program with HTS, but one of the things we did about a year and a half prior to that is we started a program where we worked with the Army Service Component Commands. We had teams with Army North, Army South, Army Africa, and Army Central Command, which focused on that higher level. When we shuttered the human terrain system proper program down, the program continued in a different light, and it's called the Global Cultural Knowledge Network. And it's still in existence today. It's still at Fort Leavenworth. Slight change in mission, far fewer people, but I believe more operationally relevant. They do more long-term things. They work more in the social science, sociocultural methods, and applying these different sociocultural aspects into studies that are now truly relevant at that level, at that higher level, at the COCOM and Service Component Command levels.
Yeah, that's interesting to be able to service the COCOMs. That I know that program was starting as, that support was you were trying to grow that actually when you were taking over. The ability to respond to a specific need. I guess if I was going to pick one thing I would like to see is, and I agree with you, Trent, like we used to go to NTC ahead of time, but it was just a rotation. It wasn't a unit specific rotation to, prior to deployment. And maybe break off someone from the team in theater and have them come and go through NTC. And like, this is no shit what it's like here where you're at. And then, work with that commander to get them to see what asset they were going to get. Because there were times, I watched many units rotate over the top of me, and they would come in, and the biggest value I had for them was I could get them to stop making their mistakes sooner and start to apply some actual energy into the problems earlier. And like at one point, this it doesn't matter what unit it is because they all do the same thing. Like, we have our battle plan. We're going to push the Taliban south to Pakistan. At the border, they'll gather and we'll annihilate them. Like, raise your hand. You're like, that's not going to happen. Yeah. It's going to snow, by the way, not the fighting season. 2, all of your vehicles are so old and so worn out, you're going to push out maybe 10 miles and then something's going to break and you're going to have to self-recover. And then you're going to come limping back to the camp. And guess what? Like, yeah, right. Well, we're going to go do this. We're going to push south to the border. And you know what happened? They pushed south about 10 miles. They broke. Girls had to pee. They had to figure out how to get off. They didn't know where the mines were. There were no mines. And so they were like, mission over, turn back and come back. And their entire battle plan, the entire thing was based on this annihilation of the Taliban. And yet the unit before couldn't make dead Taliban show up anywhere. Like they would not engage because they don't want to be pushed south to the border of Pakistan.
They don't want to die.
They don't. So they would avoid that fight, but they would absolutely dominate the social fight, and they had all the influences in the town. And the unit got it. And to their defense, they figured it out pretty fast. And they're like, "Oh, okay." But one of the funniest things was a piece of the mountain broke off and closed off the main pass that they wanted to use to get through. And we told them about this ahead of time because it had happened like right when they first got there. They would never know about it. And they're like, "Yeah, whatever. It's a rock in the road." We're like, "We don't think so. We think it's pretty big. We'll get a picture for you." And we got a picture eventually. And it was like big enough for like a donkey cart to go under, maybe a very small car, motorcycle, yes. But any military vehicle, not a chance. And the Afghans named this thing like the rock that could never be moved. And they had it was ridiculous. And the engineer was like, "There's not a rock on this earth I can't blow up." And then finally, like when he went out there on a mission to look at it, he's like, "I can't blow this rock up. There's nothing I can do to chip away at this thing and break it in any kind of timeline." That like the entire battle plan was scuttled by a piece of a mountain falling off. And then just this whole thing. So you're right. Getting in there at NTC to say, "Hey, this battle plan, focusing on the Arab Emirates and their financial influence, stop. Can you make clean water show up? Can you find out what's important to these farmers?" You know, when you say rule of law, they have one. Do you know what theirs is? And if you don't, how are you going to negotiate the two rules of law? Anyhow, longer term capability on station specific to that area so that you can learn the elders once and stop asking the same questions over and over again, stop promising the same programs over again as a military force. Having that person there to say, "Hey, here are the last 5. I would do this all the time. Here are the last 5 units here in Baghdad. They've all had the brown hand shaking the white hand on the slide saying that we're going to fix this problem." And then have them go, "Oh, wait, that's right. We all do the same thing." That's what I would like to see, is that kind of capability where you're able to flex in pre-deployment, but also stay long enough to develop that capacity to understand that area. But, you know, that's not going to happen. So, frustrating.
Yeah, I always like the idea of having like a high level. So having what you were saying with the COCOMs, Trent. So we've got when we say high level with COCOMs, I'm assuming we're talking the regional commands.
Right.
When we're in country. So like RC South, RC North. So it's someone at that level that actually knows, okay, these are the tribes I expect to be in this area. Okay, there might be a migration of Hazaras going through this area. They're tribal in this place. Baluchis hate everybody. Iranians do a lot of business in Delaram districts, so expect to see Iranians around. And by the way, they don't all hate you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's good information to give to a combatant commander in RC South. So that high level, great. And then build up on that low level too. Have that HT, human terrain analyst that's already, you know, he's gone out there, he's done this before. And he doesn't look scary because he's wearing civilian clothes. Might have a beard, probably wearing slacks, might have a vest on. Yeah, we're going to make him carry an M4, but whatever. So, and the research manager capability, I was always kind of iffy on that one. Like, it's good knowing someone who knows what the systems look like and how to upload it all in there. But I think I ran into a research manager or two that couldn't write to save their lives. So reviewing those reports and putting that into a system is kind of, you know, that's a step above them. And that ability to brief, every one of those guys has got to be able to brief, because that's where you need credibility right off the bat. So,
yeah, I would even change those designations. My era, it was less designation specific, and it evolved into that because you had to kind of manage it. But I was technically an RM, but I did all of the jobs, you know?
Yeah.
And so how do you, well, anyhow, whatever. How do you better select these people? By the way, Tom Barth was in there. I don't know if he's still watching, but he checked in with us. Hey, Trent, what else do you want to add about HTS and that capability and your experiences?
Well, you know, like we talked about, Pete, I think that It's definitely a capability that the Army can use, military at large. And the big problems to tackle are how do you make an enduring program last with, like John said, people that understand their jobs and know them without with part-time labor force. So I guess what I would say with HTS is the problem is still there. We have different kinds of capabilities out there that are trying to fix the problem, but until there's some sort of unified program or directive that pulls it all together and does the right things, we're kind of stuck with all this piecemeal.
By the way, Kevin Cochran just checked in. It says, "Hey," so.
Holy crap, it's Kevin. That guy was awesome. Miss you, man.
Yeah. Actually, I want to, John, you have to help me tell the story. And Trent, I know you're part of the story too, but you had colonel things to do. But the culminating exercise, or at least in terms of field problems, was to have a live fire range where we drove through as a patrol and engaged targets on the side of a mountain, which is fun Army stuff, like target right, target left, all these things. Yeah. 4 vehicles in a convoy patrolling through, and it was supposed to be like this dramatic end of cycle exercise with live fire and gunners and drivers and TCs and everything. But Trent was right. It's like saying, "Hey, that's not what we do. Some of these people are social scientists. We don't need them shooting, live fire weapons." But we still were forced to comply and do at least the spirit of the exercise. And so, John, what's your memory of how that went when we did the final live fire exercise?
Oh, that was a blast. So. Who was in my truck? I was in the lead truck.
So Mike was in your TC.
Yeah, Mike was TC, and we stuck. Oh yeah, the social scientist that quit on his first day. He was the gunner. We stuck him up on the gun. I remember
probably because nobody wanted to clean it.
The Air Force guys were all super focused on this. I think half the HTS people were ready to take a nap. The catch-up speed was keep the fuck up. I remember telling everybody else that. So, and I remember just hauling ass through this thing.
Yes.
And I remember Rob, he starts tracing the target back. So he starts shooting at it when it comes into range, and target pops up and it's bam, 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 bam. And he's following it all the way around. And we're like screaming and tapping his legs. No, stop. You're going to shoot the people behind you. So we never got that far, but I'll always remember the stream of cuss words from Mike towards Rob. I thought the social scientist guy was going to cry for a little bit. But good times, man. I love mixing special operations people with social scientists who've never touched a gun before. It was a blast.
I remember pretty clearly the whole exercise thing because I thought the whole thing was ridiculous. At that point, my ridiculous meter had been filled up. And so this stuck out for me because, the unit, God bless the unit trying to do the training, but, they were not tactically. One of the things, just for the audience, one of the things they would have us do is anytime there was a culvert or a place where a bomb could be stuck, halt the patrol. Everybody had to get out and clear and wait. And then if you halt any patrol to go look for a bomb, you're never going to get anywhere. And if you find it, that's 10 hours of your day gone. So no one really does that. If you see something, you stop and you deal with it. But they trained us in a way that was overly cautious. And so Mike and I were talking about it because I was the rear vehicle TC. And he's like, if we see contact, we're just pushing through. And if we see a ravine, we're just going to drive over it before they can detonate anything. And we're just going to go through as long as you keep up. Like, we'll keep up, And so we did the course in 15 minutes. And it's supposed to take like 2 hours. Do you remember this? And we came back and they're like, "What are you doing back?" Like, "Well, we're done."
Yeah.
And then they're like, "You can't be done." We're like, "We're done. Here we are. We're done."
Yeah.
And so they made us do it again. And then we did it faster.
Hey, the catch-up speed was no shit. You fuck up.
I promise, we're not going to fall behind. Don't worry.
Yeah. not going to be a
talk
problem.
and everything. But that was sort of like
Yeah.
Kevin was the driver, by the way. Kevin was our driver, and Kevin had no problem keeping up. He just kept mashing on that right pedal, and we just kept not shooting and just taking our armor and putting it to work. If they want to shoot at us with small arms, you're welcome. We're not staying. We're leaving.
Yep.
Hey, so John, you had Mike in your vehicle.
Oh, what's up?
You had Mike in your vehicle.
Yeah, Mike was the TC.
Yeah. Do you remember the report he sent back to hire when they kept calling for contact reports?
No. Kind of wish I did, though. It sounds like it would be pretty good.
Oh, I remember it. It was receiving fire, sending the same back out.
So funny.
I mean, who there is going to tell him he's wrong? That guy'd seen more combat than anybody else in that training program.
Oh, good old war stories and everything else. I guess so. Just around the horn here, Trent. What do you want to add? Anything at all you want to say, or any observations?
I guess the big thing I want to add is I want to thank you for the opportunity to come on and kind of keeping HTS alive with the Break It Down show. I think this is great. Again, I've said it over and over. This is I think it's a good capability. There's a lot of work to be done based on the old model that could make the improvements, leveraging programs that are already in existence, like the GCKN, at Fort Leavenworth, and bringing it all under one umbrella. But the biggest thing is it was good seeing a couple of the old HTS fellows and playing catch up.
Yeah, likewise, John.
Yeah. First thing, thanks for having me on, and damn, I miss you guys. It's great talking to y'all. Anytime you guys want to talk HTS, it's great. I do miss my civil affairs time. I do miss my HTS time. As far as now, I work in a training development role for the Navy. So I work for NOC TSD in Orlando on the Sailor 2025 program. So big program. Navy's trying to redo how they do the training for all their ratings. So I'm just thinking about all this stuff, and it's just fascinating compared to like what we're doing now, and going for the straight up, how do I teach an aircraft electrician how to do his job better?
Yeah.
So,
and I guess I'll just say in general, if you are interested in this kind of capability, you can always reach out to me, pete.com. I've got dozens of shows talking about how to do this well, whether it's cultural competency, or yesterday's show was talking about ethics, and she's a PhD professor who teaches at the Stockdale School, for the Navy. And they talk about ethics and how do you ethically, look, fellas, you've all deployed several times. How fast do the ethics change on what is and isn't important? It's just impossible to expect someone to reliably go through this ethics chicanery and come out the other side with what they're given pre-deployment, and how to survive that, like hating the enemy, but also not degrading the enemy. Like, all right, okay. You cannot, it's just so many things. And so to understand these things well at the HTS level or at the military level, you have to have this bevy of proficiencies, whether it's language capacity or cultural capacity, whatever it is. There's a lot of things to master. So we've got a lot of those resources here. And anybody who, again, wants that. We did a whole week on what is that thing called? The SFABs. The SFAB school was looking to get some information, and instead of the standard things, we grabbed actual pros that do this stuff well and put together some great shows. Anything in closing at all, fellas?
Again, appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to push